Dr. Saira, and this is Ask Dr. Saira, the show where I answer your questions about relationships, personal growth, and spirituality. So, our question today is from Jane. And Jane says, "Hey Dr. Saira, I've been following you for a while, but I'm confused about something. We have been told to sacrifice religion, cultures, families, and you're telling us not to. What's up with that?" We have been told to sacrifice religion, cultures, families, and you're telling us not to. What's up with that? That is a great question, Jane, and I'm so glad you asked it. So when I first heard about this concept about how we shouldn't be sacrificing, I was very confused because it's true. My family, my community, they actually talked about the value and how, like marriage is a sacrifice, and you hear things like a compromise. You'd say, when you really care for someone, you're willing to give your life for them. We hear all these kinds of things in the narrative, right, around sacrifice. And what I want to make sure to be clear on is that there's kind of two different things. So I'm not saying don't give, right? I'm not against giving. I'm not against service, right? Service is where we're giving selflessly without anything in it for us. And I think that's really important. And that's actually, they did a study, a Harvard study, to look at what is it that makes people happy, actually keeps them happy throughout their lives. And when they take away, the basics, like when you have enough to basically live and have your basic needs met, after that, the thing that makes people happy is unconditional giving without any reward. So that's actually altruism, or giving without getting anything, is actually really good for us. It's healthy for us. We need it. So when I talk about sacrifice, I distinguish that from what I would say is called service. Okay, so let me tell you some of the differences. So with sacrifice is about you lose something. You lose energy, you feel resentful, you feel irritable about whatever it is that you're doing. You're losing. There's a loser and a winner, right? In sacrifice, one person's lost something and somebody else has gained something. Whereas in service, we're giving from a different place, right? We're not giving from a place of losing something. The giving is actually fulfilling. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can be engaging in the exact same activity, but depending on your inner state, it will either be understood by you as sacrifice or service. Dun, dun, dun. So let me give you an example. Let me talk to you about cooking meals. Okay, I love to cook. I really love to cook, but only if I don't feel like I have to. As soon as I start feeling like, oh, I have to do this, then it starts tumbling into that land of sacrifice. Like, oh, I have to give up my time and my effort and my energy. And what I found is when I'm in that mindset and I'm cooking, the food doesn't taste good. It actually doesn't taste as good as it does when I'm wholeheartedly cooking because I feel inspired and I want to serve my family. It's a very, very different, and the receivers, the eaters of the food notice the difference in my intentional space because of the way that the food turns out. So it's a very simple example, but I think it's very poignant because it reminds us that it's the same thing. I'm making a meal for my family, but am I making it from a place of wanting to serve and give in that big, generous, open heart place? Or am I doing it from I guess I have to make the meal, everybody's hungry? And I mean, we're human, right? There's times I'm going to feel that way, here we go. But in that moment, if I can first of all, be aware that that's how I'm feeling, and then do something to kind of shift myself. So one of the things, and you might have used this trick, is something like listening to music or listening to a podcast or doing something kind of fun as you do that tedious task can actually flip us into making it not feel so dreary and draggy and a sacrifice. It can just be like, oh, this thing that has to be done, but I don't have to feel so upset about having to do it. Right? So again, that's just a very simple example, but I want to return to the question around, our religions, our cultures, our families tell us we have to sacrifice. And I'll say, I wonder if maybe one of the things that we're trying to do is encourage people to be kind to one another and to not make it all about them and to actually keep those communal values alive. Right? Because I think what we're facing right now, if we look around us, is this very, very kind of almost toxic individuality, right? Where I care so much about what I want and I need that I'm actually willing to put other people at harm, willing to sacrifice really meaningful relationships so that I can have what I want, right? And that's not good for us because we're social mammals. We were built to be in community. We were built to work in groups and support each other. And so service allows us to kind of reconnect with our natural instinct, which is to help other people. If you meet little kids that have not been like severely traumatized, generally little kids, they're helpful. They want to help, right? Somewhere along the line, they feel like they have to help or they're made to help, and then it takes away some of that sweetness, right? So yes, sacrifice as a concept is taught in these different places, but I would argue that what's meant to be taught is actually service or generosity or giving. It's switched the language, maybe it's a semantics thing, but it's switched to this thing where you have to suffer in order to give to the other. And I simply don't think it's true. Now, there are situations where you can't get out of it, right? Like you have a new baby, you're going to be sacrificing your sleep. There's nothing you can do about that. You just have to kind of push through, right? But that irritation, that resentment, that anger about it, that is something you have a choice over. How you respond to this thing that you've made a commitment to do, that you have a choice. And sometimes we're going to be in a bad mood, and that's totally fine, right? But we don't want to live there. You don't want to live your life giving to other people and hating that, right? Showing this face of generosity, but inside feeling really bitter and resentful. That's not healthy and that's not good for us. So I would say, yes, we have been taught about this concept of sacrifice, but I would say let's take a step back and really look at the value that's underneath that. The value is about generosity and giving. So is there a way to give and be generous without losing something, without cutting into your own self? I think there is. I think it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice in setting boundaries, in being self-aware, in actually looking at what's happening inside of us when we say yes or no to things. I think it takes effort and practice, but it's absolutely possible to be in community, be in service, and not actually be sacrificing. So those are my thoughts, Jane. Hopefully that helped you kind of distinguishing between sacrifice and service. I think the community around us is talking about trying to teach us service, and we're misunderstanding and doing that in a way of sacrifice. So if you have a question that you want answered, send me an email, I'll answer it. And I'll see you next week for Ask Dr. Saira. Bye.